Welcome back. Former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte has been put on a plane to The Hague after the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for alleged crimes against humanity. The fiery populist, you'll remember him, he was a leader who has been investigated by the ICC over his deadly crackdown on drugs spanning many years. His daughter Sarah, who is the Philippines vice president, told the Philippine Star newspaper that this amounts to what she described as oppression and persecution.
There is no legal basis at all to turn over or to endorse the former president to ICC.
As she defends her father, critics, they've been holding demonstrations and a vigil to show their support for this arrest and also to honor the lives of those killed in his war on drugs. Our next guest has been a vocal critic of Duterte and has been arrested during his time in power on charges that many deemed politically motivated, charges that we should say were later dismissed. We're really happy to have Maria Ressa joining us. She is the CEO of the Philippine news outlet Rappler. She was a joint winner of the Nobel Peace Prize 4 years ago, and her efforts to safeguard the freedom of expression. Maria, it is a pleasure to have you with us tonight. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Let's dive straight in. I'm wondering if you could speak to the global significance of his arrest. What does the prosecution of this ex-leader really tell us about the International Criminal Court's ability to prosecute those accused of extrajudicial killings?
Actually, I mean, the best part about all of this is that during a time that's been called the era of impunity, the Philippines actually shows that impunity ends at a certain point, that some kind of justice, hopefully the beginning of a sense of justice for the victims of the brutal drug war that President Duterte carried out in his 6 years in power, that will happen. So it's historic for the Philippines. It's the first time a Philippine president has been arrested for crimes against humanity, that an Interpol-led arrest actually ended this impunity under President Duterte that now has him going to The Hague. Reminds me of, when I was still with CNN, the Milosevic, he was picked up, brought to The Hague, and then was jailed for 5 years before again, there was a sense of closure and justice.
He had retired in the summer of 2022, as you know, Maria. Can you give us a sense of what the people in the Philippines had felt after that and before they received that news today that he was finally in custody? Was there a sense of frustration, hopelessness, that they perhaps lose hope that this moment wouldn't come?
I think for the victims, it's been almost a decade, 9 years, right? So President Duterte took office in May of 2016. Within hours of him taking the oath of office, the first killing in this brutal drug war happened, and the first casualty in our country's battle for facts. And this has been replicated in many countries around the world where big tech, social media plays a role in the public information ecosystem. In our battle for facts, the first casualty was the number of people killed. He's still extremely popular. The first who was elected through social media for 6 years in a row, the Filipinos spent most time globally on social media and on the internet. That ended in 2021. But leading up to this, look, our president, Marcos, ran along with the daughter of President Duterte, Sara Duterte, as his vice president. They were called the Unit Team, powerful families from the north and the south of the Philippines putting their political machinery together and using social media effectively to do that. We've seen this tattered over the last few years. Sara Duterte herself has been impeached, possible corruption charges that she will have to defend as soon as the new legislature takes office after the May elections this year. So there's definitely a political angle to it, but simultaneously, look, the victims, and they're out today holding up photos of their sons, their daughters, victims as young as 3 years old, 5 years old, families caught in the crossfire. Now they feel a sense of justice.
Yeah, and you answered what was my next question, which was more about the political dynamics and also really to punctuate the families that have been at the center of this all. And I also have to ask, Maria, you're reporting on Duterte's bloody war on drugs. It made you the target of his crackdowns, as we mentioned earlier, in the crackdown on the press. So I wonder, how were you able to carry out your research, your reporting in the face of threats from your government at the time?
With great difficulty. And I think in some ways, America is going through a version of what we lived through. And I am both Filipino and American, and to see this happen in my two countries is heartbreaking. Look, in 2017, the social media attacks began to target me with hashtag arrest Maria Ressa. I'd come from almost 2 decades running the Manila Bureau and then the Jakarta Bureau for CNN. And then hashtag arrest Maria Ressa was like fertilizer. I was arrested 2 years later in 2019, and then 10 arrest warrants, 10 criminal cases filed against me in Rappler. We fought that. It's been almost a decade, and after President Duterte left office, we began to win the cases. Just a reminder, within 6 months of taking office, Duterte became the most powerful leader the Philippines had ever known. Our Constitution is set up, patterned after the United States, 3 co-equal branches of government, a Bill of Rights enshrining freedom of the press, freedom of expression, and yet that chilling effect, when someone targets you with legal cases, so it was social media attacks followed by lawfare, it's not just a chilling effect. They threatened the shutdown of Rappler. We should have died in 2018, but in many cases what we did is we never gave up our rights. You have to hold the line on the rights guaranteed by the Constitution, and for that I was threatened with, cumulatively almost actually 103 years in prison. We've come out of that period. We continue doing our jobs. We did it with great difficulty, but the point is, do not voluntarily give up your rights. And at some point, that Martin Luther King quote, some sense of justice comes. It could take a while, almost a decade, and I still have 2 cases that are live. I could still face 7 years in prison. It's at the Supreme Court. I have to ask the Supreme Court for approval to travel. But you continue fighting for your rights.
Work that, as you say, carried out with extreme difficulty, but I would also add with extreme bravery, and work that has earned you that Nobel Peace Prize. Maria, thank you so much. Would be remiss to also acknowledge former CNN's Manila Bureau Chief as well. Maria, pleasure having you on air tonight. Thank you for what you do and continue to do.